Back when my grandma was still alive, I would always walk down the block to her house every day to help her with various chores. There was this one day that I walked over to her house the same time I always did and decided to let myself in. I was surprised she left the door unlocked. She was a very paranoid old lady and normally kept everything locked. I saw her bedroom door was open upstairs and I heard her opening and closing the drawers and cabinets. I walked upstairs calling grandma, and as I was about 5 feet from the door, she slammed her bedroom door shut. I knocked asking if everything was alright, and at that moment my cell phone began to ring. It was my grandma's phone number. I was so confused, but I picked up the phone anyway. My grandma was on the other end, telling me not to come over that day, as she was walking over to her seniors club. I felt my heart skip a beat as she told me this. I hung up the phone before she could say anything else and remained silent. I knew exactly what was going on. I played dumb and said, "Grandma, I'll be downstairs," and made my way to my grandma's kitchen to grab a knife and dial 911. It remained silent in the bedroom after what happens. The police arrived and burst into the bedroom, and a loud and sudden bang of gunshot caught me off guard. When the paramedics arrived and wheeled out the intruder, I recognized the man's face. It was my grandma's next door neighbor. Apparently, he saw that my grandma had left the house and broke in to look for jewelry. And when the police broke into the bedroom, they found a man hiding next to the door with a large knife in hand. If I had walked into that bedroom, I would have been as good as dead. This is the most haunting memory of my life. Me and my wife were getting home from dinner out, and as soon as we stepped out of the car, we noticed that the front door to our house was open. I told my wife to wait outside while I ran inside and ran straight to the bedroom where I hid the shotgun. I loaded the gun and scanned every single room upstairs. There was no sign of anybody. I made my way down, scanning the main floor, followed by the basement. There was no sign of anybody and there was nothing missing or moved. I called the cops, and when they arrived, I told them what happened. And then they began to investigate the rooms upstairs, followed by the basement. Nothing was turned up. They made a case of asking us if we were positive that we shut the door when we left. I myself was starting to have doubts, not completely sure if I had, but my wife remained confident that we had shut the door. The police seemed sure that if somebody had broken in, he didn't stick around long, as there didn't seem any signs of burglary. My wife was worried sick, crying that she wasn't comfortable being in the house. I comforted her the best I could, assuring her that whoever broke into the house left in a hurry. I finally fell asleep after hours of rolling around in the bed. But my sleep was immediately cut short by a disturbing scream of my wife. I looked at her and she was staring intently in the direction of the closet. It hit me like a bullet just then. I had forgotten to check the second closet. I looked over and saw for the briefest second a man poking his head out of the closet before closing the closet door. Within 5 seconds, I had my shotgun loaded in hand and cocked it back to let the intruder know that I was armed. I screamed for him to come out, and just like that, the closet door opened. But instead of showing submission, he made a dash move for the front door of the house. I could have shot him, but I didn't have it in me. He was never caught and he got away scot-free. I think having a shotgun saved us from a terrible fate. About a year ago, while still living under my parents' roof, I started experiencing some weird occurrences in my house, specifically my bedroom. While I was laying awake in my bedroom one night, I heard a creaking sound coming from across the bedroom. My closet door had somehow been opened. When I got up to check, I subconsciously checked for anybody inside my closet, even though I was 26 years old. Of course, there was nobody inside, so I shut the door and went back to bed. Later that same night, I would hear rumbly, rattling sounds coming from up above the ceiling. It sounded like something in the air ducts. It was a very strange sound. I really had no idea what to think about it. But as soon as it stopped, I kind of forgot about it and quickly fell asleep. In the morning, I did tell my dad about the sounds in the attic the previous night, but annoyingly, he didn't seem very interested, or he just didn't take me very seriously. That night, I again lay in bed reflecting on life when yet again the slow creak of the closet door creeping open broke the silence. This time I felt genuinely afraid. I knew the door was completely shut. It would take somebody twisting the doorknob for it to be able to push open. This time I took an extra careful look inside the closet for anybody, even though it wasn't a big closet and there wasn't anywhere somebody could hide. I rationalized it as being a broken doorknob or something. And that same night, I again heard the rattling sounds coming from the ceiling. It was exactly what happened the previous night. The next morning, I convinced my dad to take a look at my closet door, but he quickly determined that the door was fine. When it was closed, he pulled on it and it showed no signs of coming off the latch. Of course, he suggested that I was simply leaving the door unlatched, but I knew I wasn't. That night I sat up waiting for it to happen again, and right on cue the closet door creaks open. I waited for the sounds above the ceiling, but there was just a long silence. I turned on my lamp and looked up at the air vent in my room, and I screamed at the top of my lungs. I could distinctly see two wide opened eyes peering through the air vents at me. My parents burst into my room asking if I had gone insane. I explained everything and they looked at each other like I had completely lost it. Not surprisingly, they dismissed it as a dream or the fact that I was too tired and other things. They even began to lecture me about staying up too late. But to this day, I know I hadn't imagined it. It was too real. And the closet opening routinely, I know for a fact that it wasn't my imagination. I have never been a believer in the paranormal, but I still have absolutely no other explanation for those 3 nights. I live in the Poconos with my wife and the kids. There's a small lake about a quarter mile away from our backyard. I commonly take my kids down there to go swimming, up until last week, that is. Now, I'm never letting them go down there again. I haven't told anyone about this at the fear of sounding crazy. It was last Saturday when we went over to the lake and we set up our chairs on the sand. It's like a little private beach in our own backyard. It's been amazing. Me and my wife sat in our beach chairs enjoying the sun while our kids were splashing around in the water. I always tell them not to go too deep. They are still young, 6 and 8. We sat there for good 2 hours that day. Neither of us were in the mood to get wet. Eventually, my wife got tired and decided to walk back home. I agreed to stay with the kids a little while longer as they were somehow still having so much fun playing in the sand and water. The sun was setting at this point and I was getting tired. They were going a little too deep, so I called them to come back closer to the shore. They couldn't hear me apparently, so I stood up and got closer. Before I could call them again, I noticed something in the water. It looked like a black roundish object, and it was moving closer to my kids. I ran into the water closer to my kids, calling them to come out. When they got close enough, I dragged them out myself. When I turned back to the water, the object was gone. My kids were confused as hell. I didn't know what to tell them, so I just told them it was time to go home. We packed up and walked back to the house, but I wasn't happy when I got home. I was comfortable with what I just saw. That thing looks like no sea creature known to man. Dinner was waiting for us when we got home. I ate really slow, thinking about the object in the water and whether or not to tell my wife. My wife asked me what's wrong. She noticed I was eating too slow. I decided not to tell her right then. After dinner, I took a flashlight with me and walked back to the lake. By then, it was already dark out. I got to the lake, but to be honest, I didn't even know what I was expecting to find. I shined the flashlight all around the surface of the water, searching for the black object. And just then, I heard a large splash come from somewhere in the lake. the kind of splash of something emerging out of the water. I thought it might be some kind of animal in the lake. I shined the light all over the place, searching for the source of the sound, and then I found it. And I realized I was dead wrong. There was a silhouette of a humanoid figure with long black hairs covering its whole face. It just stood there facing me, but not staring at me. Not that I could tell. I dropped the flashlight in horror and sprinted all the way back to my house, slamming the door shut behind me. I haven't told anybody about this. What kills me is that the lake is only quarter mile away from my house. And for what I know, that thing could be watching me through my window right now as I write this.